The following production is brought to you by the Talkin Buds Leafs Show.
One of the things that we have always prided ourselves on here on the Talkin Buds Leafs Show is I like to think we are an objective podcast. Like, yes, we cover the Leafs. We're Leaf fans. We're sitting in a Leaf nerd studio cave right now. We cheer for the team. There's no two ways about it. But within this fan base, it's like anything else. You've got your extremes. You've got the, like, irrationally, epically, bizarrely positive people who just, they can never do anything wrong. Anytime you say anything negative about them, you're an idiot. Look at the numbers. Losing in the playoffs is unlucky, blah, blah, blah. And then you've got the extremely negative thing where they can't do anything right. This team sucks. Dubas is an idiot. Blow the whole thing up, whatever. And you and I have always called it down the middle. If they stink, we say they stink. If they're good, we say they're playing really well. With that in mind, and given the last week, which saw two pretty good victories against a bad Columbus team and a bad Chicago team, and then one brutal old-school Leaf loss on the second half of a back-to-back against Columbus again, where people were once again bitching and complaining about the effort. As we currently sit here right now, the Leafs have 74 points. The Tampa Bay Lightning have 73. I think this is going to be it the rest of the way. I actually don't hate this because we've been sitting here for weeks going, God, this is boring. So at least the battle for home ice will give us something to sink our teeth into in the home stretch here. Given what I just said about objective takes, how are you are you confident that they can win against the Tampa Bay Lightning in a 7-game series right now?
No, I am not confident at all. And I find myself being just between two opinions of this team. And it's just earlier in the year when they were playing their best hockey, I thought the way they were winning those hockey games was how they could win a playoff series, just playing better defensively, being tighter. And everyone said, or the naysayer said, of course, the Leafs are winning in November and December. And I think me and you said, but they're playing so well that I don't think it's the case. And then now we're in February again, and they've been kind of a above 500 hockey team for the past month here. And now I'm just kind of back to thinking that they're not good enough. Like they did play well, but they've come back to earth. And I don't know. I don't feel super confident in this hockey team right now.
Is there a move that they could make? Do you believe that they are a deal away, a trade away from putting them where they need to be? Or are you like, no, this is the same core, the same management. We're going to live and die with the core four here. There's no one you can bring in that's going to push this team over the top. And one of the reasons why I'm kind of poking at that right now is this has been the week of Patrick Kane. Let's go get Patrick Kane. I want to make myself clear on this let's go get Patrick Kane train that everybody's on. I love the idea of Patrick Kane in a Leaf uniform. I hate the idea of paying a massive price for a guy who's been dealing with a hip injury for months, who looked awful, like completely awful and invisible Wednesday night against the Blackhawks. Sure, you want to go get Patrick Kane? Awesome. I'm not giving up anything quality for him because I don't believe he's good enough right now to push this team over the hump. And there's some people who are going to crucify me for that take, but I don't care. Like, if you can get him and you can trade a late round pick and a guy off the Marlies or a roster player for him, but even then, how do you make the money work? Chicago's going to have to retain some salary, which why would they do that if you're not giving them back a quality asset? I don't want to hear this Patrick Kane anymore. It doesn't make any sense.
This city's for all teams. Think about how many make-believe scenarios there have been for superstar big name players to come play for either the Jays, the Leafs, or the Raptors. Like a couple months ago, that Shohei Ohtani was coming to the Blue Jays. And now we're talking about Patrick Kane coming to Toronto. Patrick Kane, there is a 1% chance of that happening. That is not happening. What is happening is everybody is bored out of their minds talking about the trade deadline, because that's all we've been talking about for a month.
Oh, longer than that, man. Longer than that.
And it's just now everybody just to get on the radio, get on your podcast, get on your YouTube channel. I don't care what medium it is. It's now everyone's bored out of their minds, and we're all just going to convince ourselves that Patrick Kane's going to come to the Toronto Maple Leafs because there's literally nothing else to talk about, because they aren't getting Timo Meier. They're not getting Patrick Kane. They're going to get somebody who's not exciting, who's not going to play in that position that everyone wants them to play them in. And it's all just boredom talk to me.
Which I'd be okay with, because I personally think that the prices for some of these name guys like a Timo Meier that you just said are way too high. So if you can get a guy that can bolster your top six and you can make the money work, I'm totally for that. Because I just think last year, after they lost to Tampa, Kyle Dubas came out and he basically said, we're going to live and die with this group. And we believe in this group. And at the end of the day, it's the core guys of this team that are going to take you to the promised land. And yes, you need supplemental help in your bottom six, and that's something they haven't gotten. And that's something I think that they need to prioritize, and I think will help them. But when you start throwing around these name guys, I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. I don't see anybody coming in here. I think it is like, listen, you're going to play Tampa. You might have game one in Amalie Arena in Tampa now. And it's on you guys to go out there and do it. And I know there's an argument to be made that, like, well, they've had a pretty good season again. Dubas should go out and get them some help. But at what cost? And I know that I was sitting here. I listen, there's people who are listening to this who are like, you're crazy. You were on here 2 weeks ago and you're like, just make the deal. Just make the deal. But it's like, I'm not opposed to moving off of Matthew Nyes, but it's like what Nick Richards said to us last week. You better be damn sure you're getting a good player who's going to be here a really long time if you're going to move off an asset like Matthew Nyes.
I think you hit the nail on the head a couple of minutes ago when you asked, is one player coming in enough? To me, that is the question. They go out and blow their brains out to go get Patrick Kane or Timo Meier or whoever impact forwards at the top of the trade deadline board. Is that enough? And I honestly, if I had to give an opinion right now, I don't think it is. I really don't. Going out and just trading another first-round pick and your top prospect for a guy to come in and fill the role that everybody wants him to fill, I just don't think that that's going to put them over the hump. I really don't. It's not happening either. It's not happening. It's actually really irritating to put on a show that covers the Leafs and listen to them putting Patrick Kane in a Maple Leafs uniform.
There's so
every
much,
show's doing
it's
so
brutal. Much delusion in this fan base, and if you don't share that delusion, you're negative. And it's like, we're not negative. We're not. This is a good hockey team, but guess what? They're going to play another really good hockey team in the first round who beat them last year and has been to the Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row. Like, if the Lightning beat the Leafs and play the Bruins in the second round, nobody's sitting there going, oh, the Bruins are going to walk here. Like, no one's doing that. Like, this is like, you're playing a modern day NHL dynasty. So I think sitting here and being skeptical of when you see nights like Saturday night against Columbus and you see the issues they have in the bottom six and you see the issues with Matt Murray or whatever, and you see how god-awful Justin Holl is, and you like, it's okay to sit here and be like, they might lose in the first round again. And here's what I'll say. I've been on here with you a couple weeks just bitching about Gary's modern day NHL and how much it sucks and how much as like an entertainment product it's awful. we're going to get our own sort of interesting theater here in these next couple of weeks because we're going to see what's really going on behind the scenes. Does Kyle Dubas believe his job is in jeopardy? Because if he does, you can't worry about Matthew Nyes on the left wing 2 years from now. You got to worry about winning a round. And as you and I have said multiple times, we do think that's enough to save his job, is winning that one round. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see like where, because it hasn't really been addressed, and he was asked about it last week, and he kind of danced around it and was like, well, I don't want to talk about that right now and whatever. Nobody knows what Brendan Shanahan's doing behind the scenes and what he thinks and how he feels. But we're going to get a really good look here at, does this man believe his back is against the wall? Because if it is, it's time to go Anthopoulos here.
Yeah, it's true. He really has no reason not to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's why not do it?
If you're going to get if your job depends on winning a single round, you can't worry about where Matthew Nyes is going to slot into your lineup 2 years from now because you won't be here to see it.
And you don't even know if, like, I know it's very exciting having a prospect who everyone likes, but you also have no idea if he's even going to be, who knows? He could be a third liner.
But I do agree with what Nick said last week, which is you can't, and this is part of the issue here, is everyone knows the Leafs are looking for depth, whether that be on defense, whether that be on forward, whether that be whatever. So the prices for anyone are insanely high. Like any sort of trade discussion that Kyle Dubas engages in, Matthew Nyes is the first, when you're talking to the opposing, okay, we want Timo Meier. Okay, we want Matthew Nyes and this guy and this guy and this guy. And so it's like, well, we won't give you Nyes, but we'll give you this, this, and this. And then the Sharks go, nope. And you're not getting Timo Meier.
Yeah.
Because they know that this is a team that has to win a round. And that's a really unfortunate spot to be in.
I think they really need to at least do something to bolster those bottom two lines on their forward group. Like I was watching that Chicago game, and you're looking at the fourth line, and I know it's a fourth line, but when you're playing a team like Tampa, that does matter because we've seen fourth liners burn. Like how effective Corey Perry is when he plays the Leafs. He's a fourth liner. And I'm watching the game and I see, like, no offense, but Zach Aston Reed's the most boring hockey player to ever don the uniform. And he's not even the worst player on that line. There's been a revolving door of dudes on that line, and it's largely ineffective. And their third line also isn't very exciting either. So to me, they're not getting a top guy. That's not happening. They don't have the assets, and I don't think they're willing to trade the assets, whether Dubas is going to be gone or not. But to me, they definitely have to find a way to get somebody to play on that third or fourth line.
Well, and I keep sitting here talking about the theater of Kyle Dubas' future. So we're talking about it from the perspective of, hey, man, your back is against the wall. You got to do what you got to do here. Like, you got to. Let's say they win the round and you keep your job and you've made that deal.
Yeah.
And you've traded away assets and futures for a rental.
And I honestly
you can't
believe
afford to re-sign.
You would think that way too.
Yes.
And also he's also following through on his promise.
Yeah.
He's going to ride or die with this group.
Yep.
And and if this group is as good as everyone thinks they are, and they're paid like it, then they should be able to get it done. And to me, all you can really do at this point is just try to fill in the little holes. Those top guys are supposed to be good enough to win a round.
Well,
but you just got to plug in some other guys to kind of offset how effective the Nick Pauls are, the Corey Perrys, the Sorellis,
if you're going to stack, we went through it, I think not last episode, the one before, we went through Tampa's bottom six. It doesn't even compare to the Leafs bottom six. Like, there's no one the Leafs have in their bottom six that is as effective as a Corey Perry or a Nick Paul at what they do. And I know Corey Perry is like a polarizing player, but like the guy plays a role and he's effective at it and he does it for cheap.
Yeah, it's just they have characters.
Yes.
Like they have characters who are going to appear in a playoff series. Pierre Engvall is not a character.
No.
Pierre Engvall is the closest thing to a bubble hockey player I've ever seen. He can only do this.
What do you say to
He can't do this. He can only do this.
What do you say to the people who I'm glad you brought him up, because what do you say to the people who I saw on Twitter this week who are like, if Pierre Engvall was a, I don't know, Nashville Predator. I always pick the Predators for some reason.
you really do.
I do. I always pick the Predators. If Pierre Engvall was a Nashville Predator, we'd be looking at him going, they should go get a guy like Pierre Engvall. You know what? He's a big guy. You can plug him into your bottom six. He's got some size. He's got a little bit of scoring touch. And I thought that was interesting in the sense that, it shows the perspective we have here. We as a Leaf team, I do it all. Nobody loves to chirp Pierre Engvall more than I do. But, that's actually true. We sit here now and we go, oh, my God, Pierre Engvall, you're 6'5", but you play like you're 5'6". But it's if he was like I said, a Nashville Predator, you'd sit here and you'd go, look at this guy, Pierre Engvall, 6'5". Look at you can plug him in on your third line. He can get some good minutes out of him. He can score. Alex Kerfoot, same thing. I think teams would be scared away by Alex Kerfoot's cap hit. But if you're another team, if Alex Kerfoot was, like I said, a member of the Seattle Kraken, you'd be looking at him going, what if they went and got a guy like Alex Kerfoot?
No, you're right. I mean, that's the thing. You watch these players night in, night out, and then you start to kind of sour on them because you get familiar with them. But I always just try and think about the series that they've lost over the past couple seasons, and it's just what we've talked about. It always just seems like there are characters that show up for whoever they're playing who make the difference. And they just don't have any of those guys. So Pierre Engvall might be a guy that you look at Nashville and be like, this is a guy we need. But I've seen Pierre Engvall in the playoffs plenty of times now. And guess what? He might be a nice little player in the regular season who has a great goals above expected, but he does nothing. He really contributes nothing when it really matters.
Well, this is what I said to you a couple weeks ago about the curse. And what is it about guys who just put on that jersey and they're like, well, to me, I'm not going to be effective at all.
If you put Pierre Engvall on the third line of the Boston Bruins, that would be interesting to see. What would happen if he played on that team?
Yes.
How would he fit in there?
Yes.
And how effective would he be?
And just the style that they play and the players they have, would that open up a bit more opportunity for him? Or would he just be the same guy he is here, a soft winger who occasionally scores a nice goal?
I honestly believe, too, I think this dawned on me when everyone's talking about how shit they do against bad teams. I honestly just believe that the Toronto Maple Leafs just have that effect on every other team in the NHL. Every team in the NHL hates how much attention this team gets, and they love watching them lose and choke away. So when the Columbus Blue Jackets play the Toronto Maple Leafs, I honestly believe that they are more motivated to beat the Maple Leafs than they are against the Tampa Bay Lightning.
So two things on that. I think what you're getting at is the fact that Toronto is the hockey mecca of the league. So two things on that. One, the Leafs handled them the night before in what I thought was one of the most boring hockey games I've ever watched in my life. And I mean that in the best way. It was a perfect road game. It was boring. They shut them down. They scored some goals. It was great. The Columbus Blue Jackets are awful. So you come in on a Saturday night, hockey night in Canada. You're already out of it. You've been out of it for months. This is the biggest game of the season. How many of these guys are from the Greater Toronto Area or Ontario or Canada for that instance and know the Saturday night 7 p.m. Leaf game is the national stage in this country, and we've had a dog shit season. So let's go. We're going to have the game of our life tonight. That's the first point. The second point is something I've hit on a couple of times already. So all these idiots who are like, Dubas is going to walk if you don't give him an extension. He's going to turn to Shanahan and go, I'm out of here, buddy. No, he's not. Because he's the general manager of the hockey mecca of the world. He's the general manager of the most relevant team in all of the league, a team that moves the needle in all of the league, the most important franchise in this league, period. So it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I think what I was picture Pierre Engvall on the Bruins. He probably will look better. And like what you said, it's almost like a curse. It's when you bring in a player from another team and from the outside and what you've seen from him in another uniform, it looks good. And then they come here and it seems like they kind of just fall into the Leaf lull of being soft and not getting the job done. And I just really believe that if you're going to play for this franchise and deal with just everything that comes with it, you need to there needs to be like a specific personality trait that players on this team need to deal with it, and just kind of grab the bull by the horns and just be like, you know what, we're not doing this. Like we're not gonna let this team steamroll us. Like it's just, again, they're missing characters. They don't have any characters.
You don't like the ensemble cast.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I think they just don't have the personality.
It's
I don't know.
It's like when you watch Avengers. I'm gonna go full Colin Cowherd here. It's like when you watch Avengers. You look at a character like the Winter Soldier. B-level, C-level character. But you cast a guy like Sebastian Stan, instantly gives that character legitimacy. You look at Ant-Man. Ant-Man's a franchise. Ant-Man's a 3-film franchise for a C-level character. How did that work? Cast an established actor like Paul Rudd to play Ant-Man.
Yeah.
That was my Cowherd.
No, I like that. That's good.
Yeah, that was the perfect Colin Cowherd analogy.
I like that. It's just, I mean, it's kind of a dumb conversation because it's really not a tangible thing. This is just us.
Yeah, you need guys who
being Leaf fans. It's not really something you can prove. It's just we've seen enough failures to know that for some reason, it just never works out here for anybody.
Yes,
and they never get it done. So it's really kind of a dumb conversation. But I think the theme for me this episode is just they don't have the right people. They don't have the right characters. And for that reason, I don't feel confident them going up against this fourth line of the Lightning of Maroon, Perry, and Belmar. And we have Aston Reese, Pontus Holmberg, who I do like Pontus, and then a revolving door of wingers.
Pontus slander will not be tolerated on the Talkin Buds Leafs Show.
No.
Two things I want to ask you before we get out of here. Auston Matthews makes his return Wednesday night against the Chicago Blackhawks. You are tripling and quadrupling down on your take that you pay this guy whatever he wants and you worry about everyone else later. That includes Mitch Marner. And I agree with you. So please elaborate on that.
I know you have to build a balanced roster and a hard salary cap. And even Marchand was here a couple weeks ago and poked fun at their players taking less and the Leafs taking more. But when Auston Matthews is not in the lineup and when he draws back in the lineup after watching this team without him, it's just they're an irrelevant hockey team without him. And I know it's not fun thinking about a guy making $15 million a year, but I'm sorry. As a Leaf fan, and from what I've seen, I would be willing to throw a blank check right in front of his face to make sure that through good and bad, through wins and losses, that this guy is here for life.
I wouldn't go as far as to say they're irrelevant without him. I would go as far as to say that watching this hockey team is mind-numbing when Auston Matthews is not in the starting lineup.
I like Mitch Marner a lot. I think he's a great hockey player. I like William Nylander a lot, especially after this season. I think he's just taken it to a whole nother level. And I like Tavares, but it's just having that. It's also the position he plays, too. It's the number one center position. The guy who's capable of scoring 60 and is now capable of winning the Selke, which is just, you're never going to find that. If you let go of this man, you will be spending eternity trying to replace him.
I tell you what, man.
Eternity.
Yeah, I tell you what, man. People ask me all the time about this podcast, and they're like, "Oh, you do your podcast?" Well, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's just so my brother and we do it for fun. We love doing it. We love the team. We love watching the team, and we just have a lot of fun doing this." And watching 82 hockey games would be significantly less fun if 34 was not your starting centerman night in and night out. They are a mind-numbing hockey team to watch without him.
Just think about the history of this hockey team. Like when they had number one centers through the 90s and now they've always been a competitive playoff team. And then you go back to years where we were counting on Tim Connolly to be the number one center of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they didn't make the playoffs.
Jimmy Connolly comes in and we're like, oh man, yeah, plug him in with Phil Kessel and Joffrey Lupul.
Yeah, we were.
Oh my God.
He can facilitate Phil. Like that's a nightmare. And I know you have Tavares, but Tavares just can't be that guy anymore. So I think after this season, your number one priority.
Yeah,
everyone is dead to you except you put all your focus. I don't care about. I love William Nylander. I do. But William Nylander can be replaced. Yeah. Auston Matthews cannot be replaced. He cannot. Yeah. So you do whatever you have to do to make sure this guy is wearing this uniform.
What do you say
until he retires?
What do you say to the people? And I actually believe that there's credence to this. I really do. And I think I know what your reaction is going to be when I say this. But what do you say to the people that when his deal is up in a few years, 97's coming home to wear the blue and white?
Well, I've said that. Yeah. I like to think I was the one who kind of started that whole thing, because I do believe that he would come here in a heartbeat if he really wanted to, because I just think his ego is that big.
So if Matthews does walk, that's the only saving grace I think we have is there. I do believe that there's a legitimate possibility that Connor McDavid walk. Well, I think he's gone from Edmonton regardless. I don't think he's re-signing in Edmonton. But I think there's a legitimate possibility that he signs here.
Yeah, where else would Connor McDavid? Like Matthews, it's different because he's got a different personality.
And he's a U.S.-born player.
He's a U.S.-born player. So I get him wanting to go to L.A. or New York or whatever. I don't think he's ever going to play at Mullet Arena. But with Connor McDavid, it's just, I mean, this is, again, we're getting into the Patrick Kane's coming to Toronto kind of crazy conversation.
Foil hat.
But this is my, like, hot take of the century for the past year. It's just, this guy's got a big enough ego, and he knows he's the best hockey player to ever put on a pair of skates. And I think he's got a big enough ego to want to come here and take on that challenge.
And he loves it. And he like, he wants to be here seemingly.
Yeah. I would like to get, I'm not like, to me, when I think about Matthews leaving, it's just like, where would he actually go?
I think he would go to,
like, it's not even about where he wants to go. It's about what good team. Because he's not going to a crap team. He wants to go to a good team. What good team has the salary cap availability to sign him to a free agent contract?
Well, I think you can eliminate the New York Rangers immediately from that. And I think the team that scares me the most is I think he could be potentially sold on a rebuilding LA Kings team and being like,
I mean, and they're not exactly even like rebuilding. No.
Like, and like, that's the thing. It's like the LA Kings are not a team that is like 5 years away. Like the LA Kings are already well into their sort of retool as an organization. So I think you could look at him and say, I think to me, the team that scares me the most with respect to Auston Matthews leaving is the Los Angeles Kings.
Yeah, and I mean, Kopitar is almost done. That would give you the room, but they again, right now they only have $1 million to spend, and so like you would really have to go. I admit I have not done this research because I just really thought about it right now, but you'd really have to go through the larger American markets because that's where you'd probably want to go and see who's got some expiring contract to have the ability to sign this guy to the contract he's going to demand, because it's going to be by far the biggest contract in the history of the league.
One more question for you, and it's about the current team and their play. What? And I've been on this for a couple weeks. What in God's name happened to this team defensively? They are brutal. Like they're running around. Everybody's out of position. Giveaways, chances up the middle. Like what the hell? Like we sat here in November and we're like, wow, defensive structure. Look at this. Look at what Sheldon Keefe has done. And it's a fire drill every time against bad hockey teams. Like the Chicago Blackhawks are in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. They're that bad.
I thought they cleaned it up in the second and third, but the first period.
Oh my God. Like running around. Like, what are we doing, fellas?
I don't know. I think.
Do you think it's personnel related? Because I don't. I saw these same guys play a fantastic defensive structure for all of November and most of December?
I think it's a couple factors. Number one, there was a lot of injuries at that point, and I think the guys coming in and filling in the roles were kind of playing out of their minds a bit. Number two, I'm starting to give the Leaf fans who are saying, of course, they're playing their best hockey in November and December, starting to give them their due a little bit because they have a point. They do have a point. And
do you think that this speaks to, there's a lot of people who say, of course, they play their best hockey in November and December because a lot of teams don't start ratcheting it up until we get closer to playoff time, which I agree with. But at the same time, it's like Columbus is not a playoff team. Why are they dominating you in your own end at home on a Saturday night?
And I'll also say that at that point of the season, Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov were sporting .930 save percentages. Like they also could have been masking what, like, I mean, Samsonov still is having a great year, and I feel confident with him in the net, but that was also the point where those two guys both were sporting .930s. So maybe they also helped in that department as well.
I get that, Ryan, but I just, like, if I'm looking specifically off like eye test here, like they're 29th in the they're 6th in the league. Sorry, wrong number. I was looking at.
They're still like
the numbers look good. Like, I've got the numbers here in front of me.
Yeah, they're still a good
5th in the league goals allowed, 6th in the league shots on goal, penalty kill percentage 14th, so middle of the road and penalty minutes. Like the numbers are good.
They're just giving up more high danger opportunities.
Yes, and it's, to me, I just loved watching them play that way and play with that structure, not seeing guys run. Like, I am done watching Justin Holl play hockey. And he's another guy who I saw on Twitter this week that, like, when I was talking to you about Pierre Engvall earlier, how many of us would be sitting here going, they should go get a guy like Justin Holl, like big body, kills penalties, you can slide him in at your number 6.
A big body who doesn't hit and doesn't have great speed.
Lost every moment of his life. Looks lost out there.
Yeah, don't you find it interesting how when a defenseman gets plugged in a top 4 role, that sometimes the opinion of that player just gets elevated because they're just playing so many minutes? Who actually decided that he's a top 4 defenseman? Nobody.
If I was going to rank, here's Rob's defensive depth chart for the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. TJ Brodie, Timothy Liljegren, Mark Giordano, Morgan Riley, Rasmus Sandin, Connor Timmins, Justin Holl.
I think Sandin is a damn fine hockey player.
So would you? He is a really good hockey player, but he has moments and shifts. Like, I don't see Timothy Liljegren making the boneheaded decisions that Sandin does. But I
do think Sandin.
So would you flip Sandin and Riley?
I think Morgan's just had a tough year because he had an injury, and I just think he just hasn't really, his identity's been a little lost this year. It's just he's not getting 50 points anymore. Like, his production's down, and when he's not producing, then his pinches kind of stick out a little bit more, and his risk taking sticks out more. But I think Rasmus Sandin is, I think he's arguably their most physical defenseman.
I'm not opposed. If you want to flip him and Riley, so if you want to go Brodie, Liljegren, Giordano, Sandin, Riley.
I have such a problem disrespecting Morgan, but I just think he's had a tough year. I don't know if
Friedman said the other day that Elliot Friedman said the other day that the organization is starting to sour on Morgan Riley.
They just signed him he's just started his new contract, and it's not crazy, but it's also not.
If Morgan Riley scored a few more goals, I think that would change.
Yeah, I just think he's always been a great skater. He's never been shut down, but he's always had the ability to rack up some assists. And then the one year, a couple of years ago, he potted a bunch of goals, and he was always projected to be an offensive defenseman. And I think he's just kind of lost his identity this season. And I also think that we are falling in love with Liljegren a little bit too much because because it's a good story. I mean, he's played very well.
I think he's
But
awesome.
let's not plug this guy in as the #1 defenseman for the next 10 years. You know,
I think he's awesome.
it's just
Who you're talking about right there is me. I think he's awesome. I think if people were like, if you wanted to flip around Brody and if you wanted to make the case that Timothy Liljegren
I don't
is their
think
best
TJ
defenseman-
Brody's their best defenseman. I'm sorry, I don't.
in terms of playing defensive
TJ Brody
hockey,
makes me like angry sometimes.
in terms of playing defensive hockey and shutting the guys down and
I think
not
they take
making
turns.
stupid choices, I think Brody, guys who in the defensive zone when they have the puck on their stick, I'm not worried about them doing something stupid. TJ Brody, Timothy Liljegren, everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I think they take turns.
That's why
I don't have an order. I don't. I think every single night it changes.
That's why I have Sandin so much lower on my list, because I'm trying to find the quote that Friedman gave about Morgan Riley.
I know what
can't
you're
find it.
talking
Yeah,
about. I saw it.
yeah, he said it on 32 Thoughts, I believe. I paraphrased it, so whatever. There was a quote made, I think, from Elliot Friedman about how the organization is souring a bit on Morgan Riley. But anyways, the reason why I put Rasmus Sandin so much lower on the list is because there are moments. I think he's a good player too. I think he's got a ton of upside, and I think you could make the case that he makes Riley expendable. But there are moments where I watch Sandin and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, so
I just think he has the highest ceiling in terms of, I think he's their most physical defenseman, which is shocking. I think he's their best puck mover when he's at his best, and I think he's their best I think he's the biggest offensive upside back there as well.
we're arguing semantics here since it's the bottom of the list. But do you agree with me putting Connor Tibbins above Justin Holl?
Justin Holt, here's the problem with Justin Holt. He's a big defenseman who doesn't hit and doesn't skate very well. And that's the problem. Do I think he's the worst hockey player I've ever seen? No, I don't. But it's just what you're seeing this season with Liljegren and Sandin being better and Connor Timmins coming up and playing better. It's just having a defenseman with a little bit more speed and a little bit more offensive upside, and they're not worse defensively than Justin Holl. It's just there's not a lot of room for a big defenseman who's not physical and can't skate anymore. He's going to get exposed, and he has been getting exposed. But since they've had nobody, and he had one decent year with Muzzin, who it's just all of a sudden we like plugged him in this role, and it's just he just doesn't fit it. And it's really and he goes through his ups and downs. That's for sure. That's one thing about Justin Holl. It's just he's an up and down defenseman. And right now he's just on a complete downturn.
I just want to give Ryan his props because I've been sitting here on my laptop trying to find this Elliot Friedman quote, and Ryan just stalled for time and allowed me to do that. So everyone, tip your cat to Ryan. So here's the quote from Elliot Friedman. I think you're going to see Toronto surprise everyone with respect to the trade deadline. They're looking for a long-term solution on left wing, and Riley has started to fall out of favor with management and fans.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to make an argument of why he's been so good. It's just more of he's the longest tenured guy. He's a likable guy. He's been their best defenseman by almost like process of elimination for a long time. And yeah, he just hasn't had a great year. He's kind of just lost his identity a bit.
Yeah. And if the offensive production was there, I think it would be a different story, but it's not. So it's high risk, low reward at this point.
Yeah. Sometimes the pinching doesn't look good when you're not scoring.
Man, we sat down at the beginning of this and I'm like, what are we going to talk about? And here we are going on 40 minutes here. Look at this. Look at us.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it. We're on the
Sometimes it takes a while to
get the juices.
get
going.
the juices warmed up, thoughts going through your head.
That's another thing. You know, I started off this show talking about like yours and my personal brand and how we like to do things, and like part of that too is like we make some notes about like topics we want to hit, but when you and I sit down and we turn these mics on, like it's pretty off the cuff.
Yeah.
And I know some people like that and some people don't, but hey, we're heavily sports radio influenced. What can I say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks everybody for checking us out. If you like what you see, hit that like and subscribe button below.
Spread the word, tell your friends.
We really appreciate it. We'll catch you guys next time.